Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by singer, songwriter, performer, and multi-instrumentalist Ed Roman. Ed's songs have received rotation on more than 100 radio stations across North America and 600 radio stations worldwide. So we're going to be talking to him about his songs, his success, and about the awards that he's won as well, and what he's working on now and got coming up for the world. Ed, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, from Ontario, Canada, the Great White North, as it were. I was born, bred, raised, hatched, however you want to look at it. And I had it was the 1970s. And it was like a childhood's dream, really. I mean, living outside a greater metro, I grew up in a farming family, multiple generations, even back into like Europe. And farming was like, something that, and gardening for that matter, something that everybody did just, to have food and things. But, we had barns that we played in and built forts and, get into trouble and spend hours of our time at a creek and, catching crayfish and making fires. And, all of that was a very blessed existence. Remember it as a very peaceful time, and also a time of a lot of excitement because of a lot went on in my family on a regular basis. So I grew up in a household with 3 generations, grandparents from Eastern Europe, Slovakia, my mom and dad, brothers and sisters that are, 10 years older than I am. And music was like everything. It seemed like when I was so young, people knew lyrics, were singing to lyrics in cars, knew why the lyrics were written, the subject matter as to where it came from. I mean, if you knew even themes from television shows, it was like somehow some rite of passage. There was some sense of like noble pursuit in being a musician. And hand in hand with that, just because I was so electrified by everybody else's enthusiasm, including my, friends and peer group, I struggled immensely with dyslexia. I mean, if anybody knows what dyslexia is, usually people will say, well, it's a learning disability. But I've come to realize, and working with the Dyslexic Society and being an ambassador for them and teaching myself as a music educator for over 24 years, nobody learns the same way. Information is required, when somebody is as I say, electrified by the possibilities of something. And so often music was that for me to help get me out of the rut that I was in and the difficulties that I was in academically, struggling, hours after school, summer school, tutor. My mom really was the big, motivator in a lot of it, because she was always like, well, the self-esteem problems that go hand in hand with it, with either people snickering because you can't read a word in class, or some teachers that, didn't have a bedside manner that, maybe they should have, were pretty, cutting. And it's hard. And then also being an overweight kid, that compounded a lot of problems for me, and music was that escalator to get me away from what that was. And as I grew with music, I started to pursue the academic side of music with the same fervor as, somebody would if they were going to go into studying science or math or biology or whatever it might be. So it liberated me. It gave me that tool to look at things in a different way. And why I snickered at first when I had said, people say it's a learning disability. That's what everybody always told me it was. I actually see it as a gift. And even working with autistic kids and other kids in the past as a music therapist, I understand that, you know, if you label something right away, that could be its greatest detriment of all. So moving through something tactically, and this is what dyslexia has taught me, is that dyslexia, like other things, is a three-dimensional comprehensive perception of learning. We want to tactically touch things, vices, screwdrivers, engines, instruments, things that we can touch and experience, because the byproduct of it is very gratifying because we're manipulating it and it's manipulating us at the same time. Academics can be very flat. It can be, you know, open a book, you're reading for hours, you're reading something online for hours, whatever it might be. There's a lot of, all of that doesn't necessarily have the same immediate principle of three-dimensional connectivity. So it's ironic that dyslexia itself, and this is why I say my mom was so instrumental and a big part of it, is because she's the one who put a guitar in my hand. You know, she realized how excited as a young kid I wanted to play. And I was always playing on a piano and in the front house that, you know, nobody ever played, that was my grandmother's, and making up little songs and singing on the stool in the kitchen, you know, into an old lamp that looked like a microphone. It wasn't necessarily the entertainment of it. I wasn't like looking for gratification is a part of it, but not the immediacy of it. I realized that, like that first thing I said, that music and lyrics has this power to change perception, to make you look at things in a certain way, because the power of the word, the way the words are put together, the phrase, the statement in itself, that somehow. And I say why my life was very busy at that time frame, between the farm, my dad, who was, you know, a public servant. He was the mayor of our township for over 30 years and police commissioner for 14. And at the same time, he was also the first coalition candidate in the history of Canadian federal politics. And he won as an independent, and he was in Ottawa for 4 years. All of that really fed into who I was as a writer, because my dad was very instrumental in also being, you know, you're 7 sitting at a kitchen table and there's this political debate going on. And then all of a sudden my dad would say, well, what do you think? You know, ask the 7-year-old. Somehow knowing that, in my opinion, even at that age, whether it may be taken drastically or as some form of gravity in the conversation, was irrelevant, but I felt like I was a part of something. And, you know, they say, you know, from the mouths of babes, sometimes adults themselves don't have that perspective anymore because they're so colored and jaded already by so many things. So a lot of all of that made me who I am today, and the pursuit of music, connecting with my management now in the United States, who I'm just trying to think, like, man, Mike and I have been working together for almost a decade. All of that has given me a vehicle, and as well as the Dyslexic Society and some of the work I've done from them, and the Red Omen album and that song in particular, has taken the music all over the world. And I, you know, people say, what are your greatest achievements? You know, like what's your greatest reward? Like this, we're doing, you know, writing a song, performing it, creating something out of nothing based on the living experience. That to me is tantamount to like ecstasy. You know, it's such an epiphanating feeling when you're in a creative mode. Like even today, just doing some things around the farm here and planting garlic and stuff, just troubleshooting some things. And I like being able to create something out of junk. You know, if it's so what if it's an old used thing? There's got to be some other purpose for this. And creativity, you know, is abound in that way. You know, if that's why I guess as an educator, for many years, having a three-dimensional space in music as that craft really turned on a lot of people that I taught. And it was really comforting in many ways, aside from seeing some of my students go on to become performers, go to school, higher education, that circumnavigated their lives, that principle of artistic thinking, because it gives you this other way of your own reliability, without having to rely so much just on the system or a hardware store, or whatever it is. If we're talking about just doing something simply and you're creating something like, and sometimes you need that hardware store, but in other cases, I don't know, there's something so much more gratifying. It's like, that's the other reason why I grow food, because the tactical response and the struggle is exactly what makes me appreciate it tenfold. And knowing what goes into that process, you know, and failure, learning from the failure of knowing that, man, I just lost all my cucumbers because of thrips, hundreds of cucumbers, you know, like, what am I going to do? Nothing. I can't do anything. I have to deal with it. But there are other victories in other places, depending on how you look at it. So, I mean, I'm going off here, and you asked me one question. I'm talking for 7 minutes, but that's who I am. You know, that's where I come from and why I am who I am.
Oh, it's not a problem at all. Like you said, that's who you are. Well, let's talk about your style of music. What would you, if somebody asks, what kind of music do you do? What would you tell them?
Well, I'm like kitchen sink. I think I've used that analogy a lot now, and I'm comfortable with it because I like a lot of different music, like a lot of varieties of music. And it's funny, you know, we grow with certain things over the course of our lives, you know, and music and art is one of them. You know, we reflect, we go back to those points as a form of nostalgia to say, hey, you know, that feeling, you know, that those tunes that I loved when I was 15 or 16, or those moments that you may have had remembering that music and listening to that music at that time. It's part of that, you know, education process. So who I am today and the music that I am is very reflective of everything I've responded to in the past. So as a young person, you know, my grandparents were listening to like Eastern European gypsy music, Django Reinhardt. Like, my mom and dad were from the 50s era, so big band jazz, Count Basie Orchestra, Duke Ellington. My mom and her brother were huge Buddy Rich fans. My brothers and sisters who were older than I were into like rock and roll, like 70s rock and roll, but my brother had a real nostalgia for like 50s music. So everything from like Little Richard and Chuck Berry, Eddie Cochran. My sisters were all into folk music. And then when I kind of came in my own, you know, that electric era of music for me as a young player, as falling in love with the electric bass. You know, somebody handed me a Jaco Pastorius record when I was like 15. Two of them, right? His first album and a live album. And when I heard that music, it transformed my opinion of what the instrument could be and what it could do. And that one experience, because I'm like, what is this jazz? You know, like I sort of was a bit of a late bloomer, I guess, in some cases, because I started to get into jazz and stuff like that when I was more like 15 and 16. Where my friend, who's like this virtuoso piano player, he was like listening to Ruby Blake and stuff like that when he was like 10 years old, right? Like, so that's what I meant. That also, that influence was coming from peer groups as well, right? But though that music led me into so many things, because I started listening to African music, Afro-Cuban music, fusion music, old school jazz. That then, you know, I started loving Mingus. I was like, and then when I went to college and that whole era of like jazz, you're studying jazz at Humber College, you got great teachers, Roger Flock, Pat LaBarbe, all these people, you know, that were even played with Buddy Rich. He was teaching at Berkeley for the longest time, Pat. That it exploded in like for like 5 years of my life. And it almost seemed like after that, every artist I fell in love with, and things came after that. Man, I didn't stop listening to Tower of Power for like 2 years. I remember I had a tape cassette. I'm dating myself in the car when I was driving back and forth between college. And it was a long drive, and I used to pick up a couple buddies. So like 2 hours one way, 2 hours coming home. And on a cassette tape, I had the tune Maybe It'll Rub Off from the Urban Renewal album. And it was just, I kept recording it over and over again. And then another time I was on a Quincy Jones kick. So I had the theme from Sanford & Son, which is also called Street Talker, if anybody doesn't know, over and over again, just listening and analyzing the artists and the music in a way that was like, if people thought like, what's this cat doing? Listen to this music over and over again. There was something so electrifying about it, engulfed me. And as a consequence, the last probably 20 years of my life has been the same way, where I study somebody for long periods of time. Lyrics, especially, have, like, you know, for me in the last 2 decades have been so important to me. I've always been a lyricist and a writer. But again, that's part of the philosophical studying of the lyrical ideas and concept. I mean, I pretty much listened to Bob Marley for close to 3 years, went to Jamaica so many times, visited, you know, 9 Mile, went to his grave, met his brother, you know, recorded some music. I even recorded a tune for Jamaica. I did a video while I was there. That's how much it affected me. The culture affected me just through the music itself. And again, that's who so kitchen sink. It's like so many things define me. You know, I played in a concert band for so many years, with toured Spain, and that all is a big part of it. And as a writer and as a performer, I really like the diversity of things. One of the things that was like hard to market, I guess, if you would say, people would, you know, a decade ago would be like, well, how do you classify this? Is it rock? Is it country? Is it funk? Is it folk? It's just music. Mingus would say that. I love that about Mingus's philosophy. He would say, you know, he'd go to Europe and people would say, well, he's an American artist. He's from America. They wouldn't say he's a jazz musician. But today, you know, you ask somebody who would say Charles Mingus is a jazz bass player. Yeah, but he's also probably one of the more formidable composers of the 20th century when it comes to orchestral development inside of music. And small pieces, you know, 12-piece, 10-piece, 8-piece, an octet, right? And wrote not only in a complex way, but, you know, alive. The music was really a living. Again, those kinds of things taught me not to be so worried about defining myself and being one thing. And now it's actually been the vehicle which has gotten me into so many different places and so many stations and opportunities, because it's not just one thing. And I don't want to negate the writing experience or what the catalyst of the situation in the writing experience might be by saying, I'm going to force it to be this. You know, some of the other writers that I love so much, like Tom Waits, you know, some of the things I've heard him say where it's like, well, yeah, you know, the precipice of the idea is the most important thing. You're excited about the subject matter. So let it pull you through. Let that catalyst ask you the questions over and over again, because usually it knows more about what needs to happen in the development of the lyrical content than you do. You're there as the antenna to pick up what that might be. I quite often, even as a writer, I'm a stream of consciousness. And as a dyslexic, as you may already be able to tell, my mind doesn't stop. I'm in a sort of a continual framework of thinking. So, and it's hard sometimes to rest my mind. And so I write and I write and I write and I look for those places where I'm really liking what it's saying to me, as opposed to what I'm trying to make it say. And then my job is to organize it in some kind of palatable way that makes it, you know, it's a tune. It's this. And I have fun with that. That's a big part of the why I keep doing it, because it never changes, or it's always changing, excuse me. And if it stayed the same, I think I would, like, you know, I quit a lot of jobs because it was like the same thing over and over and over again. And I'd rather just, you know, keep moving.
Well, let's talk about some of the awards that you have won and how it felt to win those awards. Now, you won one in 2018.
The Academia Award?
Absolutely. And tell us about any other awards that you won.
I'm actually like immensely shocked, not shocked, I shouldn't say shocked. I'm immensely proud that, as I mentioned, as a dyslexic, feeling this literary accomplishment through lyric writing and having notoriety for it through guilds, organizations, and people, fans, people that like the music and are participating in it. I mean, I'm up this year for a pre-Grammy nomination. This is a very exciting thing. A couple years ago, same thing happened. One of the more latest singles, Tomorrow Is Today, is up for that pre-Grammy nomination. I could say one is better than the other or bigger than the other, but they all matter. Matters to me more than anything. And it's like, it's not corny. To me, it's not. But my greatest reward is being able to create and do that. Some of the biggest struggles for musicians and artists is not connecting your material, which is alive, it's living now. It's a relatable bit of material that you feel needs to fit into the framework of the current moment. When you're not in that flow, or you're idle, or it's not, working, or it's one of the most difficult things of all. And I guess it comes from another, part of the philosophy of why I do what I do. I mentioned Jaco Pastorius earlier, and he played with a lot of amazing people: Athene, Don Elias, Herbie Hancock. I mean, there's the Brecker brothers. It's a huge list. Peter Erskine. I mean, I can keep going. But Herbie wrote the liner notes on his first album, and it's amazing what he said, and it stuck with me when I read it, when I got that album when I was younger. And it just said, the definition of an artist is one who has the ability to fuse their life with the rhythm of the times, end quote. And when I heard that, and how many times I've said that, and how many times I've said that to students when we are talking philosophy inside of writing and feeling that sense of connectivity, not only to your instrument, but your process, your craft. That's the biggest part of it. So my greatest reward is the fact that it's working, is that in whatever capacity it's connecting. And the other thing is the people. I've met so many amazing people in my life in the last 10 years with what I've been doing. And the musicians who I played with, I mean, Tobias Tinker, who's the keyboardist on a lot of this, each other since we were 5. Like, we've been playing music together since we were 7. And having that kind of connection with people, or Dave Patel, the drummer on a lot of the work. I mean, we've known each other for 35 years. And the family, or the sense of brotherhood and strength that you have with that is like, you can't pay for that. Something that's so special that again is a part of the reward. I'm like, deathbed moment. Thank God, that I met these people and that we could do this together. Plaques and all kinds of things, and reminders. I always joke and say it's my wall of shame or whatever. It's not shameful at all. What would be more shameful is me not recognizing all those people that have helped me to get here, and that we've done it together. That's the greatest reward of all.
Tell us about any current upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about.
Well, they need to know about A Recipe for Perpetual Spring, which is an album I've been working on over the last year, and we've been releasing singles. The first single was called Stronger. It went to number 7 on the iTunes charts in South Africa. And the single after that was Tomorrow Is Today, which is the one I was mentioning. It's up for the pre-Grammy nomination. Just recently, October 1st, we released the most latest single, Happiness. And it's been doing really well, including hitting the iTunes charts. But that and those 3 songs are all part of that project. So look for the material, and it's all over the place. Amazon, iTunes, you can get my material at CD Baby. You can check out a bunch of my other stuff on Sound for free. But I also like to point people in the direction of Red Omen, which is the video I was telling you about that I created with Nelson Diaz from New York City. That has become the figurehead mouthpiece for the Whole Dyslexic Society. So any monies or attention towards that video go directly to the Dyslexic Society, which help facilitating programs for children that struggle with dyslexia. So, and we have facilitating offices in every province across the country. And it is a faction of the Ron Davis Dyslexic Society out of California, which is also in every state across the United States, and is also supported federally by 56 nations around the world, but not in the United States or Canada. So that's why I'm always talking about Red Omen. And so people want to check that out. I'd be really happy if they did that.
Okay, Red Omen. Well, when I bring musicians on the show, I like to ask them to do a little bit of a cappella for the audience so they can hear what they sound like. So why don't you do a cappella for one of your best singles?
Wow. Let me see here. Okay. So this is the one that's coming up for the Grammy pre-nomination. I'm never going to tell you what I like. Then you know me too well, know me too well. Know me too well. But then again, I might be revealing all I can tell, all I can tell. Honey, all I can tell. Well, I love, stole, and cheated. I lied and I lost. Oh, what the hell? Oh, hey, oh, what the hell? Ain't no use believing in what I believe. Believe yourself. Oh, come on. Believe in yourself. We got 1 billion miles left to go. And I should kick myself today. Hey, hey. But then the planet starts to roll. Come on. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow is today. I gave all my money to the man behind the white picket fence, white picket fence. The white picket fence. I said, please look after my soul and spiritual recompense, my recompense, my recompense. He spent our gold, silver, nickels, our dollars and dimes on self-defense. His own self-defense. Then he whistled and smiled and said, I'm off to Switzerland and France, Switzerland and France, Switzerland and France.
Sweet. You had me over here snapping with you too, and you went longer than any other artist. Usually they're kind of shy and they'll do a little bit. You really tore it up.
That's my family. Ed, do the song about the frogs, right? You know, like that's the ham in me.
Absolutely. Why don't you go ahead and throw out that contact information, website, social media links? That way we can keep up with you and your music and all that you're doing.
Thanks, Curtis. I appreciate that. You get me at edroman.net and the World Wide Web. All my social networking buttons are there. Twitter, Instagram, my YouTube channel button. Twitter, I mentioned that. What was the other one again? TikTok, you can find me on TikTok as well. And Rumble. And Special Ed Roman. If you don't remember any of those like social media platforms or whatever, you can always search me for that. And you will always connect everywhere. Latest album, Recipe for Perpetual Spring. 3 singles are out right now. Check them out. And I appreciate the opportunity, Curtis. I really do.
Definitely check it out. Well, go ahead and close us out with some final thoughts and any final things that you want to talk about, stuff that you want to discuss that I missed.
No, I mean, I'm just happy to, like I said, I was joking. It's nice to talk to people. I think that what I've learned from some of my experiences as a musician is that you play a show or something like that, and it's almost like you're preaching, you know, like there's that aspect of it. But some of the most incredible musicians I've ever met in my life are some of the most humble people. And the humility leads to conversation. And then there's no ego. It's not about this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole or my idea versus, it's just jamming. And a good conversation happens that way. And I've learned so much from people through just that, just simply talking. And it's hard sometimes in this day and age with how the pressure cooker of life has got us, you know, really ramped up. So try to remember to be kind with your words and kind to each other.
Perfect way to end it. Ladies and gentlemen, edroman.net. Good luck. I hope you end up getting more awards. Listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Ed Roman is a special artist. Android listeners, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. Ed, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Curtis, my pleasure. Thanks for having me anytime.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.